What's up, everybody? I'm Jason, and welcome back to another short video looking at some tips for the Canon EOS R5 camera. In this video, I want to talk about full frame 1.6x crop mode and aspect ratios. So to kick this off, where can you find these settings? There's actually three places that are available in the camera. The first place is under the Shoot One menu in the cropping and aspect ratio menu entry page. The second option is in the quick control menu, which you get to by pushing the Q button with a box around it. It will be the bottom right or the bottom icon on the right column of icons. And then the final option is that you can configure one of the configurable buttons on your camera to take you directly to change these settings. In the Shoot One menu or for these options, there are 5 available settings. These are full frame, 1.6x crop mode, 1:1, 4:3, and 16:9 aspect ratios. So the last three are aspect ratios. Full frame and 1.6x crop mode are a 3:2 aspect ratio, the standard aspect ratio for photography. So full frame does what it says on the tin. It uses the entire sensor area for capturing an image. 1.6x crop mode crops that sensor area down to a 1.6x crop factor or the size, equivalent size of a Canon APS-C sensor. So this can be turned on obviously manually, as I've said, if you want to say get some crop teleconverter effect going on. Obviously can be useful in certain circumstances. It can also, or it will also be automatically triggered if you are enabled, however you wish to put it, if you have an EFS lens mounted on an EF to EOS R mount adapter. When shooting in the 1.6x crop mode, your sensor image output is actually cropped. It is not just metadata or something like that. You will nominally get a 17.3 megapixel file, whether you're shooting in RAW or JPEG, out of this mode. Now, 17.3 megapixels is a far cry from 44.8. However, I would remind you, it is still quite enough resolution to make very good looking prints, even at A3 plus and larger. Finally, when enabling the 1.6x crop mode, the viewfinder image is magnified so that the entirety of that 1.6x crop image is displayed using all of the available area in the viewfinder. The last three options in this menu are aspect ratios. They're 1:1, 4:3, and 16:9. The aspect ratios are only available for full sensor area coverage, so you cannot use them if you have an EFS lens mounted on the camera. You can't turn them on. They just won't be available. And you can't set the camera to crop and then add an aspect ratio on top of that so that you have a smaller, an aspect ratio displayed in the crop. So the aspect ratios only really apply to EF and RF full frame lenses. With the aspect ratios, you have two options for how they display the out of image area. They can either provide a framing line or it can completely black out that image. The configuration option to set the quote, the display of the shooting area, although I would say it's more the display of the non-shooting area, is only available going through the Shoot One cropping aspect ratio menu entry. And you have two choices there. So you can't get to it from the quick control menu. You have two choices there, which is masked and outline. In masked, the area that you aren't, or that isn't within the aspect ratio that you selected, is blacked out completely in the viewfinder. With outline set, the camera simply draws lines in the viewfinder where the aspect ratio is, so framing lines. So as I mentioned, the actual behavior of these settings, specifically the aspect ratios, varies depending on what kind of images you're shooting in the camera, whether you're shooting RAW or JPEG. When you're shooting RAW, you will always get an image that is either the full sensor size, so 44.8 megapixels, or the cropped sensor size, 17.3 megapixels. Aspect ratios are applied to the full full image as metadata. If you're using Canon's Digital Photo Professional to process your images, it will automatically read that metadata and crop the images. However, if you're using third-party software, it basically just ignores it completely. If you're shooting JPEG, the camera actually will crop the images based on the aspect ratio information that you set, and the image size will be scaled based on the JPEG setting size or JPEG image size that you set for your output. So if you're shooting in medium 2 or small, you will end up with cropped and downsampled versions of whatever aspect ratio it's set to. I've put up the table from the camera manual. This is on page 906 of the manual that was current at the time I published this video. That shows the resolutions that you get for RAW and JPEG. Note, obviously, that the JPEG, some options are not available because sizes aren't really useful. Otherwise, you do have varying image sizes in the different modes. Now, because the JPEG images crop and throw away that the image data that's outside of the actual aspect ratio you specify, the cropping or the aspect ratios are not as much of a compositional aid as they are when shooting RAWs. They're materially affecting the images that you're shooting, so you can't really go back, undo it, and go to something else after the fact if you decided that, you know, you really wanted a wider aspect ratio or a different aspect ratio. Now, obviously, in both JPEG and RAW, the 1.6x crop mode does crop the images down to 17.3 megapixels, and this can obviously be used for, first of all, getting the appropriate aspect ratio out of, for example, EFS lenses or even third-party crop lenses. It can also be used as a virtual teleconverter effect to punch in and take your regular full-frame lens, narrow the angle of view, or field of view, and punch in and work with that. There is one more option before I go away that's available in the EOS R5 for cropping or aspect ratios, and this is separate from the one that's in the shoot menu, and it is the old school Canon original cropping information aspect ratios that has been available in Canon cameras for almost at least a decade now. So to access this, you need to go to the Custom Function 4 menu and select Add Cropping Information from that menu, where you will have the following options: off, 6x6 or 1:1, 3:4, 4:5, 6:7, 10:12 or 5:6, and 5:7. As I said, these are the old school Canon crop modes. These are only available, there are a bunch of caveats with using these. So these are only available if the camera is set to full in the shoot cropping and aspect ratio menu. So you can't apply these over cropped images. You can't apply these over any of the other aspect ratios. Additionally, the results of using this only apply to RAW files and only are saved as metadata. So using these to provide framing lines or framing guidance, if you're shooting in JPEG, it has no effect on the JPEGs that you're outputting. You will get you'll get the full resolution JPEG, full sensor area JPEG with these turned on. All they do is save as metadata in the image, the aspect ratio that you set, and then Digital Photo Professional will read that metadata and automatically crop. Although, like the shoot menu cropping or aspect ratios, this is something that you can undo after the fact. And finally, when using the custom function cropping information, this only draws lines in the viewfinder. It doesn't have the ability to blank or mask the viewfinder the way the other aspect ratios or the shoot one aspect ratios do. So the Pro is obviously, with these original style aspect ratio cropping information, the Pro is obviously you get full JPEGs if you're using JPEGs. You obviously get full RAWs with both options if you're shooting in RAW. so they can be used as compositional information or compositional guides much more effectively than potentially, at least for JPEG users, than the aspect ratios from the Shoot 1 menu. And then finally, there are more options available that sort of correspond, such as 4x5 or 5x7, that correspond to kind of more standard photographic print sizes. So I hope you found this useful. If you did, please consider smashing that like button. Please consider subscribing. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.